Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We strive to promote creators, and today we have a special, sort of new on the block in one area, but a 2-year veteran in another area, and her name is Payton Haws. Payton, glad to have you on our show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to make you our featured person here. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice.
I accept.
So let's tell us where it all began for your life. Just give us a quick where you come from, where you grew up.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in California in a little town called Merced. Well, I wasn't born in Merced, but I was raised for a lot of my life there. But I was born into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and my mother was also born into the religion, and so was my father. My parents divorced when I was a baby, and my mom was remarried by the time I was like a borderline toddler. It was like 2.5. And the man she married, who would have been my stepdad, ended up adopting me. So I took his last name and he raised me. They both raised me and all my siblings in the church. And he was a convert to the church, but was always very Orthodox nonetheless. And yeah,
sometimes converts can be more Orthodox, I feel like, or even more strongly.
Yeah.
I mean, Bill and RFM are both converts, and like we're strong, like defenders of the church. Yeah. So
yeah,
I always find that dynamic interesting.
Yeah,
Did you guys
it's kind
have
of hard.
Family prayer and family home evening?
Oh yeah, family home evening would be kind of like hit and miss throughout the years, especially as we got older and all of us were in a bunch of activities and stuff. But family prayer and scripture study, like 99% of the time, we're done always. I can think of 3 times that I ever missed church growing up, from the time I was like my earliest memories to leaving the house at 18, and I was just really sick. Like, you have to go, no question. So yeah, and I went through a lot of ups and downs personally with how I felt about church, but I never truly questioned its truthfulness. I might have questioned how I felt about certain things, or certain things were just like no fun or annoying, but I still felt like it was the way that it was supposed to be. And I follow the prophet and what they say. I was taught that what the prophet says is like, disregard the fact that this is Gordon B. Hinckley or Thomas S. Monson or whatever. This is God talking to you. Like, everybody drop everything and listen to what they're saying, because this is essentially God speaking through this person.
Same.
And so, yeah. So it was, and I, for the most part, like, I always took it very seriously, and it meant a lot to me. And I went through a lot of mental health struggles through middle school and high school, because I dealt with a lot of abuse. There were people in my family who were imprisoned, and I think there was some emotional abuse that went down in my household as well, that I think I genuinely believe that my parents did the best that they could to raise us in the ways that they felt were right and were, the way to get to everlasting happiness. And I genuinely believe that they were right in everything that they told me. Even if I didn't like it, like, I could have like a teenage, fit about something, but I took what they said very seriously. It was a very authoritarian type of parenting style, so I didn't often feel like my opinions or feelings on things mattered, and that my parents were right regardless, the prophet's right regardless, God is always right, and
That is how the church is structured, and so I think a lot of families I think it's kind of the exception if they didn't act that way. I don't know if this
yeah,
might be triggering. I don't know if your parents ever said this to you, but I know when I pushed back, because I was the same, like, overall, I was a good kid. I didn't even know, like, what doubts were, or, like, I didn't understand how people had them. Any
yeah,
problem I had, I was the same. I still the underlying assumption is the church is true. And so whatever problems are that were completely within that framework. But I know my parents, my mom especially, like if there's any pushback, it would be like, I'm the parent, you're the child. And so
oh
it's like
yeah,
that's how we
yeah,
decide who's right, is who's the parent and who's the
yeah,
child. Yeah.
because I said so kind of, statements and, we knew, like, all of us, my siblings and I knew that when my dad says something, don't even say why. Don't say why, don't ask a question, do it, or
Were you
you
scared,
don't
or
know
was
what
it
you're
just
gonna
like,
get.
it's just not worth the what you're gonna get after?
We were fearful of him, and he, um, wasn't necessarily you, like, have to try and think of the right words to use, especially on just, like, public platforms where stuff's gonna, like, be put
We
up.
can edit anything out if you want to stop and say like, I want to go back and reword that, or I want to take this part out. We can do that.
Um, okay, but yeah, I've talked about some of
But I
this
get it.
stuff on, like, a couple other podcasts before, and it's hard when, like, even relationships currently go up and down, and sometimes I'm just like, "I don't care, like, you did these things, you know, partook in these choices, and if I wanna talk about it and share my story, I will," and then there's other times where I'm like, "Okay, things are good," and I don't like anyway, um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's tough.
he
'Cause there's our
yeah, it
stories. You don't wanna overstep on their stories, but we're humans and we interact, and so some part of it is part of our story. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I think, like, I do genuinely believe that my parents did the best they could, and for their upbringings okay, for their upbringings, um, it was worse, and so I think they were doing better in raising us, but that there, in my opinion, still could have been improvement. I think everybody just kinda takes what they had in their childhood and things that they liked, they'll do in their own parenting, and things that they didn't like, they'll leave behind. And so I kind of hope and I try to do that same thing myself with my own children. But yeah, we were often very fearful of my dad, and it's not like he was regularly hitting us or anything like that. Um, but there were a lot of, punishments, or I was talking to Jean about this before we started, but I was always very, uh, sensitive with words and still am to this day. I can think of things that were said to me that really hurt me that I never forgot, and things that were said to me that really meant a lot to me that I never forgot. And so, um,
Did
I
you
know
try
my
to
mom would
did you
go
try to
ahead.
do things to please your parents as a
Mhm.
teenager?
Yeah, I was always a people pleaser, wanted to be the favorite child, wanted to be the teacher's pet at school. Um, I've always just kind of tried to get along with everybody, which is really exhausting, honestly. but I was that way, and I felt like I did a really good job at that. There were times where I felt like I might have struggled a little bit more to do it, but for the most part, overall, I was trying to please my parents, and even though I didn't always do it, of course,
And are you the
I just,
oldest
like
sibling?
no, so I'm right in the middle, so I have an older brother and an older sister, and a younger brother and a younger sister.
Oh, that's like
Oh,
me. I'm the
Yeah.
middleest child, is what I say. I have 2 older brothers and 2 younger brothers. So
Oh,
I'm the
nice.
middle.
All boys. That sounds like a rough house.
Yeah.
With
We were,
everyone.
we were twins. It was good.
Do you
Did you
think that
have
was partly
leadership
why?
positions
Yeah,
in
and
young
I
women?
was kind of like the typical like mediator, kind of tried to make sure everybody was getting along. My older sister did a lot of like um I put parenting in quotations because I still wasn't like more like she kind of would like try and boss us around with certain things when we were little
Like
to
practicing
uh
being a parent?
yeah. But yeah, and this like the youngest, was the most spoiled, I guess. But I don't I always hated that word because it feels really
Loaded.
negative. In my opinion, it made sense to me. My parents had better finances by the time he was born than they did with the firstborn. My mom was single and in an apartment complex with family and didn't know what to do or where to go, and the dad was gone. So, like, of course, the situation's gonna be different by the time she's been married twice and is now having the last kid, and they're both in stable jobs and things are
My
better,
dad would
so
say
he
that,
gets
like, the
more.
oldest kid has they have the least amount of money, but the most amount of time with the parents, whereas it flips for the youngest. They get the least amount of, like, one-on-one time with the parents, but they are usually financially better off. So, yeah, it's just kinda how
Yeah,
life goes.
yeah. But, yeah, I definitely I had a really good relationship with my mom overall. She was, like, one of my best friends, and I felt like I didn't experience a lot of the negative stuff that, like, my younger sister and my older sister have a lot of difficulties with her, and it's really she's passed away at this point from breast cancer, and so now they have these things that they hold on to where they wish they could say, like, "Why did you go about this situation like this?" or "Why did this happen?" and they can't talk to her, and they were venting to me about it once, and I'm like, I didn't have those experiences with my mom. Both of my brothers are like mama's boys, did not have those experiences with my mom. And I don't know if it's because I don't know, I was always kind of like go along to get along too. And I was always a people watcher and I would just morph to the room. So my personality could shift
Mm,
wherever I was at. So, and I think that I did that in efforts to get along with everybody, which was not good
yeah,
for like peer pressure stuff in high school. But um,
right. And
yeah,
it's just
it
it's a
was
big
interesting.
psychological burden anyway. You're carrying, like, the burden of the family, and you're not wanting to contribute to anything, so I can see how like, your needs would just get completely swallowed up in that because you're too busy trying to, like, not add or
Yeah,
cause more. Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like my little sister felt that way a lot too. And we did like a podcast episode on my channel like maybe a year ago at this point, but she talked a little bit about how she felt like her needs were ignored. Now, she just got diagnosed with autism at 18 years old after my mom passed away. We had no idea she had autism. So there were a lot of things that like medical things that she's dealt with throughout her life and emotional circumstances and sensory things where my parents were like being too sensitive, you know, or like you got to just suck it up, like, and you can't be, this terrified to go to school or be in social situations or like,
Mm,
and so she would kind of, I think she just had that stereotypical female, with autism
yeah,
masking and just
masking.
trying to, yeah. But now she's so much comfortable just like letting her, you know, whatever you want to call them, just like any of her sensory stuff, she just lets it happen and
Mhm.
isn't just she's just embracing who she is. Like she's thriving now that she's not at home
Yeah.
anymore
Well,
with
and once
people
you
telling her how to do
know,
stuff.
like, you can do things to help. I think that's one of the great things about being an adult and being in more control of your life that you don't have when you're at home is things like this because, yeah, I was late diagnosed ADHD, and I still struggle with it in a lot of ways, but, I mean, once you know what the issue is, you can learn about it, and you can find ways to kind of work around it rather than constantly fight something that you can't fight at all. So I'm happy
Yeah.
for it. It sounds like that's where she's at, and that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
Good for
she's
her.
happier than I've ever seen her. When she turned 18, she was kind of in like a hard spot because my mom had just passed away. My dad remarried pretty quickly, and they had a blended household like in less than a year. And so
Oof.
all of a sudden, like my little brother and sister are like freaking out. There's a new person they're calling mom. They have new siblings. Just
Mm.
I wasn't there for that, so I don't even know how all of it went. I've just heard about some of their feelings on it. But
Were
my
you married by then?
sister, yeah, I was married. I was pregnant with my first baby when my mom passed away. So this was in 2019,
Okay.
in
We've missed some
June.
in the middle.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
We
yeah,
can go back
we'll go
and
back
finish.
to we'll go back
yeah.
to like, did you have callings in young women's, like leadership?
Yeah, so I when I they have like the different sections of young women. So there's like Beehive, My Age, and Laurels. And they're just separated age groups. In each group, I would be the president of that group. I was the most active in the church. I loved activities. I loved all of the girls that were there most of the time. I got along with everybody. I loved the adults. I was just very, very social in a way to like force myself to get along with everybody. But
You were
yeah,
like a
so
Molly Mormon.
I really was. I loved giving when if I was asked to give a talk in church, I loved it. Like because I was also very good with school, and so and writing was a passion of mine. I had a teacher who like submitted one of my papers once when I was 12, and I won a scholarship to the college in my town to go do a writing class over summer as a 12-year-old. So I loved to write and do every time I gave a talk, like everybody would come to me like, "Oh my gosh, your testimony is just so amazing," or "I never thought about it this way." I've always been very open about my um mental health struggles that I've had over the years, or just like um, regular emotions that people experience through life. I'm not one to cover that up like I think a lot of people, especially in like the church where you're supposed to be happy all the time, would do. I would very comfortably, easily get up on the stand and give a talk about um, revelation or something, and talk about mental health struggles that I had and how um, through prayer and scripture study and these things, helped me to get out of that or overcome it. I've always had a big attachment to music. So church music like moved me so much. And um, I could just speak to everybody in a way where just countless people were coming up to me telling me how amazing it was. And that to this day, I'm a words of affirmation girl. So I Um, I thrive off of that, like, and my parents, I got the most attention, good attention from my parents when I was succeeding and moving up in a, like, religious way. So if I talked about wanting to go on a mission, like, my mom loved that, and if I talked about wanting to go to EFY, which is now FSY, I think, and she loved that. Like anything that I was doing church related, I went to girls camp every year. Both my parents worked in like girls camp. My mom was always like a stake director over like the women, so like girls camp and all of that stuff. My mom and like her two best friends were all state directors, so they'd be at girls camp. My dad ended up being a cook for girls camp every year, so he was always in the kitchen. Everyone referred to my parents as Mama and Papa Luce because Luce is my maiden name, their last name, and just everybody knew who we were. We were like never inactive, never anything like that. And so, um, and my dad had different callings too, where he worked with the missionaries. I forget what it's called, but like the missionaries would come over every Sunday, and
Ward
he would
Ward
mission
also
mission
leader.
go out with
leader.
them. Yes, he did that.
Yeah.
But he was also a fireman, and he still is to today. So he had a pretty busy work schedule, so he couldn't have a calling where he had to be there every Sunday because there were some Sundays where he was at work. And I remember asking my mom about that because I was like, I thought we weren't supposed to work on Sundays. And she would tell me, when you're in something that's like when you're like a doctor or a fireman or something that's like an emergency type of work, that's something where like the Lord understands, like you have to protect the people. You can't not save somebody's life because
Compared to
it's
working at
Sunday.
McDonald's.
Yeah. She would use that a lot. Actually, she'd use McDonald's
Mm,
as a place to like in a lot of situations. But
the
yeah,
ox in the
so
mire
yeah,
Right.
situation.
and so yeah, we never but that was actually something that was weird for me. After I turned 18, I went into a singles ward and people would like after church go to like In and Out or something. I was like, I'm
Heathens.
going to hell. I was like, how are people doing this? Because that was just not a thing. And I remember I even came back to visit my parents. Like it was shortly after I left. And my brother was like, "Oh, we should go to Taco Bell. We should do this." And I was like, "We can't do that. It's a Sunday." And my mom like had overheard and took me to the side like later that day and brought up this scenario. And she's like, "That meant a lot to me that you were, you know, saying that to your brother even after you moved out. You don't have people telling you what to do, that you're still like sticking with the standards." And she was just like really proud of me for that.
Mm.
She would always affirm, like both my parents would affirm anything religious that I was doing in a good way. So I think that probably played a role in how it affected me emotionally so much because they talk about like the spirit and being like a feeling that you have. And like I said, to this day, when people say kind things to me or affirm me in any way, it means a lot to me. Like
Mm.
especially the more specific it gets. If you're really specific about what it is, I'm just like, oh, like that tells me it was more than like you're just kind of being
Validation.
polite.
The spirit feels like
Yeah,
validation. Yeah.
For sure.
yeah.
I wanted to tell you, Payton, how awesome I think you are, just to butter you up a little bit.
Oh, thank you.
So what led you to move out? What was that about?
So the rule is you move out at 18.
Oh,
You're gone.
the rule
Okay.
did.
One of those
And
families.
so
Yeah.
yeah, I found out later that my dad told me that he wished I would have stayed longer because he had a hard time seeing me struggle financially after I moved out. And he told me this like recently. And so I'm like, what? Like I had no idea that he felt that way. There's so many things where all my siblings will talk about this sometimes, where he'll say something to us that's like nice or affirming or love or I was thinking of you this way from like years ago. And we're like, wow, sure would have loved to hear that years ago. Like,
Right.
because he's just very he's
Reserved.
communication, yeah. Like, and he can do it for people. Like, he can easily become liked by people in public and talk to people and get along with people. But at home, he
Mm.
was always much more quiet and to himself. And he he would kind of come out like if he was going to come talk to us about something, we were almost always nervous because might be in trouble. Like if it was dad and he's going to talk to us about something. Aside from like
Because of that
normal, like
authority, I think. That's
yeah,
he's your
he
authority
has that.
figure. Yeah.
Yeah, the very stereotypical, like kind of back in the day type of Mormon dad, where it was like he's the head of the house. It's like he has the final say about things. He's the one who would mostly say because I said so. You don't even question him. Um, and like I won't get into like specific details about like what could happen after that because I feel like I don't know. Maybe
That's
today
fine.
he would say that he wished he didn't do some of the things that he did, and so I'd hate for him to like not be that person anymore and be like, I don't do that anyway.
So
Um,
when he mentioned to you that he wished he had helped you a little bit, maybe he was conflicted with like being the adult, being the parent, and being your friend?
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely felt
Oh.
like I felt that with my mom a lot, where there was like a mom friendship trade-off where because we got so close, um, she sometimes when she would try to do something like in a mom way, um, I would kind of try to be her friend to get my way, but also not in just like a completely deceitful way because I also genuinely like I would hear people talk about a mother friendship relationship and how that could be bad and stuff, and I still see what a lot of people mean, but I know even at that time I was like, "Oh, I love my friendship with my mom." And we'd still like get in arguments and stuff, or my mom would want to come in and be like, "Hey," like after she said or did something that she knows wasn't okay, she'd be like, "Do you want to go to Target or something?" And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
"Can you say
So
sorry
she
to
would
me?"
play it
Like,
too. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm like,
She would switch roles.
"I
No.
want
Yeah.
you to say sorry to me. I want you like I I have forgiven people who have hurt me beyond ways that most people deal with, okay? People who have been to prison because of things that they've done to me, and I have
Mm.
completely good civil like relationships with them to this day. Obviously, there are certain boundaries after stuff like that happens, but like if somebody can thoroughly acknowledge that something that they did was not okay and have genuine like remorse, regret, and apologize and work towards like never doing something like that again,
And
like
that
I'm easy to forgive.
You
that's how
can
most
keep a
people are, and that's
relationship
one
with
of the
someone like that.
yeah.
The church
And
could
that's one of
almost
the
learn a lesson from
if the
that
church would do
example.
that, yeah, it would really help so much. Like, I know there's been a lot of harm done, and I think people feel like, well, a sorry isn't really very much, but a lot of times that's really all that's needed for people to heal and move on, and so it's kinda sad that it's something so simple that would be so transformative is being withheld, but, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
the
was
church
thinking about
actually go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh. uh,
With your
well,
dad, I
the
was just thinking like oh, sorry. It's the slight delay with the internet.
you're totally good.
Yeah, I'm changing the topic and you're keeping it going though, so you go.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just gonna mention that, like, even after stuff happened with people who ended up going to prison in my family because of like actions that were done, there were people in the church who approached my parents and told them that they couldn't believe that they reported this stuff happening, and that the church could have handled this kind of thing, and that like you don't do that kind of thing to, you know, friends and family and stuff like that. And my dad was like, "No." Like, he had my back in that, and I remember even my
Good.
grandfather, who I love to this day, said a similar thing with me in the car, talking to me, was like, "I cannot believe that he reported this, and, like, you don't do that to friends and family and all that," and I was sitting there thinking, like, "This is my own grandpa telling me
That's
this,"
why
and
we
I
have
was
a
like
problem. Yeah.
I
That's
was
why
like,
the
"What
church
about
has the
me?"
problem it does. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and do
And
you
it's
say go ahead.
oh, it's just like it's really unfair because it puts all the blame on the victim of the action for the consequences to the perpetrator, and that's just really, really unfair. I'm glad your dad had your back on that. We don't
Yeah,
I don't see those stories very much coming from within the church, so
Right.
yeah,
And is that part of your story on Payton Haws' YouTube channel? You talk about some of those
yeah.
issues?
Yeah, I've shared a lot of stuff on there. There's even a podcast I've been on where I was much more detailed about a lot of stuff that had happened, and honestly, at the time of filming that, I was really upset with certain people. I had like this was like really fresh after leaving the church, and I had a lot of people in my family being very harsh to me,
Pushback?
and so I was like, fine, I'll just go on this podcast and they'll share my story and not care about how it affects you if I'm sharing, like, because this happened to me and I've always been very private about like who it is, but I was questioning whether or not certain people would even be in my life anymore because of how they were treating me. And like I've always had the mentality of like I don't care what other people's religions or political beliefs are or what career they want or if they don't want a career. Like I've never cared about those things and I've had such a wide variety of friendships growing up and that's how my parents raised me to be. Um and it just didn't feel like I was getting that in return from a lot of my family after I left. Um
So I was going to say that we can link some of the stories that you're telling us with some of the podcasts that you have.
Yeah,
And
I could find it. I think the podcast was called Latter Day Survivors. They don't do like video form anything, it's all audio. So and I think sometimes those um are can be harder to get a lot of, eyes on or not eyes on it, ears
you
on it.
Yeah.
you appeared as a guest on their show.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the show is so it's Latter Day Survivors and the episode is just like my name. But I could find it and
Okay.
send you the link
Yeah.
too so that it could go up.
And
I'm
so-
familiar. Yeah.
So we can get back to your story. Did you go to college then once you moved out?
So I moved down to Southern California, because I was in like Central Farm type area and moved down to Southern California where my biological dad lived. And he had a room for me down there that he said I could stay in rent free. But
Nice.
pretty much everything else would be like on me. So my
Mhm.
own groceries, my like paying
Entertainment.
my own gas and my car and all that stuff. Like, but he's like, but the room has a closet, there's a bathroom attached to it. You can have that rent free. Because I think he really wanted to be a part of my life for a long time, and my parents would not allow him to.
Mhm.
And that was really hard on me as a teenager too. But so him being able to do that, I think felt very like fulfilling for him that he was able to do that for me. I'm like so grateful to this day that he did that. But yeah, I moved down there. He, introduced me to a girl who was in that like singles ward area. And I guess she like wasn't going to church that much because she was really shy and nervous and didn't really know anybody. And so since
You
I
didn't
was
have that
new,
problem.
yeah, and so I met her and we hit it off like so fast and we became best friends and we live like 6 hours away from each other now, so I don't get to see her as often, but I still keep in contact with her and her husband's doing a whole YouTube channel now, but they're still very active in the church. And so
Hmm.
now there's like a little bit of weirdness, but we could get to that later. But yeah, so I met her. And I was always like, no, we go to church every Sunday. Like, if you're not gonna go, like, I'm still gonna beg you to come with me, so I'm not sitting alone. But I'm going every Sunday. And I ended up getting like a calling. It was like ward bulletin, so I had to just keep the bulletin board up to date. Like
Mhm.
nowadays they do it like virtually, I think. But there was like an actual bulletin board in the hallway that I had to keep updated for our ward.
With push
And they always have
pins.
to try really hard in singles wards because there's no children and like young men, young women activities. That it was always a struggle in the ones I was in to create callings to try to give everyone a job or as many people a job as
Oh
they
yeah,
could. So
it definitely
yeah.
felt like that, where it was like almost
Make work.
pity jobs. There was a time I think they had me be like, they call it like a ward photographer or something, because they knew I went to
Hmm.
all the activities, so they wanted me to take pictures for like the Facebook page and stuff. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and I went to a school that's not like a college, but it's called Hollywood or Barbizon of Hollywood, and it's actually in Hollywood, California, and I did modeling, acting, and singing. The school also does dance, but that was never like a big passion of mine. So I just did the other three, and I graduated top in singing and acting, number one, and I was number two in modeling. So that was really like cool, fun achievement for me.
Wow.
But
Nice.
through that, I got to um, get called into this paid job where they're like, we need extras for this TV show. It's a celebrity show, but we can't say like who it is because we're just keeping privacy until like we have everyone we need. Um, and they ended up hiring me on for this job, and they said it's kind of like a tour bus thing. So you're gonna go sit on a tour bus in Hollywood, do one of the Hollywood tours, and the celebrity like guest is it. They're he's not really a guest because it's his show, but they're like, and we kind of need more people. So if you have any friends that want to come, they can also all get paid. And it's like $50 or something, but everyone's also insecure or not insecure. Everyone's also interested in who the celebrity is going to be, thinking it's not going to be anything insane. So like a bunch of my friends from my singles ward were free, and they were like, "Yeah, let's go, let's all do it." And so we're all sitting on the tour bus, and Kevin Hart gets on the bus,
Oh, wow.
and we're just like, so they have everyone's reaction, and we're just like, "No way!" Like, that we're here with Kevin Hart. And then I don't know if you've heard of the YouTubers Rhett and Link. They're like, they have like, I don't know,
Good mythical
following like,
morning. Yep.
yeah, their channel has got like, I think last time I looked at it, had like 20 million or something subscribers,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
probably higher now. But so they were guests on Kevin Hart's show, so they also came, and they did it was like a what the fit or something like that, and they did like these exercise things. Anyway, that was just a really cool thing that I was able to do there. But yeah, while I was here pursuing this dream of mine, um, I was also on a dating app called Mutual for LDS
Mhm.
singles.
I'm
Um,
familiar.
oh yeah, and there was a time two of my friends from the singles ward, we really wanted to go visit Utah. And we're like, we'd go through St. George, we could see the St. George Temple, and then we'd go up to Salt Lake and go to that temple. And um,
Pilgrimage.
I had family there. I
Yeah,
had
kind
family
of.
there, so I wanted to like visit some of them. And I guess like the two friends that were coming with me had like friends and people there that they'd want to see too. So we were like, what if we all just take one car and we could just make like a weekend trip out of it? So we did
Road
that.
trip.
Fun fact, my now husband was going to Southern California on this exact same day with his family to do Disneyland and the beach. We crossed paths and matched each other on the exact same day.
That's
And
funny.
so I'm like, how did I match with someone? I was thinking I
The
matched
church
with
is
someone
true.
from Utah because like I was in Utah, but then
Mhm.
because it's all like with your location. And so I was like, but he was in California when it happened, and I was in Utah. So how that happened, and we realized we like talked about it later and realized it was the exact same day that we like they went to California and I went to Utah,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, oh my! So we crossed paths
Which is
and
kinda
matched.
creepy, in one way, because like, the
Yeah.
phones, the tracking, you're like, "Oh, I
Oh,
mean, it worked out," but
yeah. So like I'm sitting here, like I was like I messaged people all the time. Okay, I would be the first one. I would message people, very like not stereotypical. The girls like oftentimes wait for the guys to message them, and I would just message all kinds of people. So I was talking to a lot of people, and he was one of them. His name's Colin, by the way. So I'm messaging with Colin, and he ends up giving me his phone number really quick. And so if you go out of the app and you have someone's phone number, it's like some people will just give it like for no reason, but a lot of times you'll
yeah.
get someone's phone number because you're like, okay, we really want to keep talking. So I ended up talking with him a bunch, and we were just getting to know each other. So it's a lot of like 21 questions, and it starts out with like little things and then it gets into deeper conversation. So we started FaceTiming, and we would FaceTime like every single day, and unless we were working. So if we weren't working and we were both home and free, we would be FaceTiming. There was a time we FaceTimed overnight, and come like 5 a.m., my husband had to like go to work, and he
Oh,
did
no.
not
No
like.
sleep.
I keep referring to him as my husband because he's my husband now, but we were
Sure.
just talking
Yeah.
at this time. But yeah, he had to go to work, so we went to work on zero sleep because we were talking all night. He's like, I didn't even feel tired. He's like,
But all
Aw.
adrenaline because he was talking to Payton.
I know, and it was this whole thing. There's another thing that happened during this time too. There was someone in my singles ward who said that there was like this big group date that was going to happen, and he asked if I could go with him and he could pick me up and we would go. Everyone was going to meet at like Buffalo Wild Wings or something. I think there's a big like Dodgers baseball game that they were going to show there, and everyone in Southern California is like huge Dodgers fans, it feels like. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go. And for me, it was kind of like that normal like Mormon thing where you'll kind of go on dates with people even if you're not interested in them, because it's just like go on date, meet different people, and like have the experience, have fun. Like, and so I wasn't particularly interested in him, but I still wanted to go and hang out with everybody. So he picked me up, but he didn't take me to this restaurant. He took me to some like back alley place, and he kept asking me like, oh, people keep saying that we would be cute together, like wouldn't it be funny if you were my girlfriend? And he would like try and hold my hand. I was like, oh, haha, like the people pleaser in me is just kind of like
Yeah.
going along to get along, but I still was doing it in a very like playful way, like this is a joke, like it's not serious. He gets out of the car, and this is like a random part of the story, but he gets out of the car and goes in through like this door, and it's still a back alley, but there's like a door that matches the outdoor wall. And he goes in and he's like in there for a while. I don't know what he's doing. So I get out and I look in there, and it's like some room where there's like other guys in there, and they're playing like these cards. And I start texting my best friend Amanda at this point, and I'm just like,
Help
oh,
me.
he took me here. I don't know what's like going on. And I thought we were all meeting at Buffalo Wild Wings. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like Buffalo Wild Wings? Like I didn't know anybody was going there. And I was like,
Oh,
oh.
no.
And so the guy ends up being like, okay, like bye guys. And he's saying bye to everybody and like holds the door open for me to like go back out. So I go out, and as I'm trying to get into the car, I realize that like he has all of the back seats down, like in his car. So like the very back ones are removed and the middle ones are like folded into the bottom of the car. I was like, why are all of
Mhm.
those down? And he's just like, oh, because it's like it could be fun to just like hang out back there sometimes, like when you go on drives. And I was like, okay. And so he's like going to open the door for me, but like I'm in front of him. And so he's behind me, and he starts like trying to kiss my neck and do all this stuff. And I'm like actively trying to pull away, but I'm not saying no or stop. Like
Yeah.
I'm was never good at that before. I'm so much better at that now, but I was not then. And I thought that I would be able to. I remember having a journal entry where I was like, if anything like this were to ever happen to me again, like I know I'd be able to stand up for myself. And I didn't. Like I just would freeze and kind of try and like wiggle or remove myself. And but yeah, long story short, basically it just continued to happen. And I tried
Like he wasn't
to.
taking a hint. He was still trying, even with you trying to get away, he was trying to like pull you back in.
Yeah, and one of the times that I pulled away, I kind of used a little bit more force, and he like brought my like hand back to him, and I pulled away with like the most force I did like during all of this, and he pulled me back in a way that like brought like terror to me. So more than just
Mhm.
being kind of nervous, I was now scared,
Yeah.
and he started choking me.
Oh my
Where
god.
I could still breathe, but it was, like, barely, and so more happened, and when he was done, he just drove me back home. So there was nowhere that he ended up taking me. There was no group date. It was all like not this real thing. And so my like biological dad sees stuff like on my neck. I think he thought I had like hickeys on my neck. And I might have from the beginning, like, because that's what
Mhm.
he was like trying to do, like right when it started. But yeah. And
I'm sorry
we
you
went,
had to experience that.
yeah, that was like, I mean, stuff like that had happened to me before, and hence, like, why certain people went to prison in my life growing up. But I hadn't had it happen in that kind of way where it was, like, the first time I, like, had fear, like, if the more I pull away, it's like the more strength he's using, and I was
More
then
aggressive.
scared to stop. So
Yeah.
that was, like, yeah, and I went to church the next day, and you could see, like, a handprint, like, on my neck, and I remember my bishop had me come in, and I'd actually already been seeing my bishop, for TMI, just like I
For
had
consensual things
well, yeah,
or
a little
or
bit.
not really?
There was one thing where, like, I kind of, like, questioned, um, it I've had times where things happened where I'm like, I'm really confused, especially when I struggle to say no at the time. I
Mhm.
wouldn't know, like, if I was gonna have to be held accountable for what happened or not. Like, did I technically willfully do it because I was, like, scared? I don't know. But I was already going in there talking to him about, like, viewing pornography, right? Because it was shown to me as a kid, and, um so it became something that, like, I dealt with on and off throughout, high school, and I vented to my mom about it a bit, and she helped me with it, but I was taught that you talk to the bishop about that kind of thing. Every single time, you talk to your bishop about it, so I even in my singles ward, like, not having, like, my parents telling me to do anything like that, I was going to him, talking to him about this, but I went in and I told him about this story expecting me to get my temple recommend removed because I didn't say no, I didn't tell him to stop. I was kind of laughing in the beginning about like all the girlfriend stuff because I it was kind of like an uncomfortable go along to get along laughing at like what he's saying.
Mhm.
And so I felt like I
Was it
gave in
partially
and just
responsible?
did it. And
Yeah.
so I was expecting him to take my temple recommend, and I'd have my recommend taken from me by so many bishops in the past growing up for going to them about pornography. There were times I was like attention seeking as a kid, and I would say that I was doing certain things that I wasn't to try and get attention
Mm.
from my parents, and would get my recommend taken away for things I didn't actually do. I was just pretending. I remember that being like my first questioning moment of like how much of this is actually like
Mm.
revelation from God.
Yeah.
Because I mean, as like a 13, 14-year-old, I had it taken away for like, I think 6 months. When I didn't
Right.
actually do anything, I was just pretending. Anyway, um, but so I'm thinking he's gonna take it, and he looks at me right in the eye, and he's like teary eyed when I told him this whole story, and he's like, I don't think you realize that you were just sexually assaulted. Like,
Yeah.
and I remember just sitting there, like, was not expecting that at all. I still to this day have a journal entry in my phone because iCloud just like every time you get a new phone, it just moves over. And so I still
Mm.
have a note where I'm like, I remember crying as I was typing it on my phone about how it was all my fault because I didn't say anything. I was like quiet. And so that actually really meant a lot to me that he said that and handled
Well,
it
because
the way that he
that's how the
did.
church teaches it, like with the For Strength of Youth and stuff. The gatekeeping is really put on us a lot of the time to be the ones to tell the boys no, it's just kind of assumed. And so, at least that was
Yeah.
my messaging. I know they always go through like little new iterations, and so, but I assume the wording was similar for you. That's kind of how they teach it to us.
Yeah. And
Like, we could
modesty
just
and
say
everything.
no, yeah, and that would have fixed it, and maybe there's part of you that thought that, um but, I mean, obviously, I think we know now, especially when you're physically pushing him away and he's aggressively pulling you back, a no wouldn't have made a difference,
Was that a
Yeah.
big
unfortunately.
relief to have the bishop respond like that?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, especially because, like, I had admitted to really 2 of my close friends from the ward that it was my fault because I felt like I participated by not saying anything and just letting it happen and just doing whatever he wanted me to do because one of the times that I pulled away and he was, like, had his hands on my neck, I got scared of what he would do if I didn't listen.
yeah.
So but
Legitimately so.
yeah,
I just wanna say, like, what you did there, that is, I mean, when these kinds of things happen, it's often fighting back will increase the aggression, and, that's not to blame the victims because obviously the person should not be doing what they do, but just from a, like, survival standpoint, when someone's willing to put their hands on your throat, that's dangerous. That really shows early on the level that he was willing to go, and so I think you did what you needed to do, and I think what you sensed by instinct to do, which was to,
Self-preservation.
yeah, be just as, I guess, as blank as possible so that you come
yeah,
out of it, and you did. So,
yeah. Yeah, and that's,
yeah.
like that's something that my therapist has talked to me a lot about too. Because even growing up, when I had experiences like that with different people, I kind of mentally would put myself in the other side of the room. I would, like, stare off into a corner and almost
Disassociate.
visualize it as, like, it was happening to somebody else, and even the person who was doing it to me, I pictured them as a different person as well, so that in our normal day-to-day lives, me and that person were different people than the ones who were, like,
Mm,
in that situation. So, it's I really, like, separated people, like, there was a version of me that was not me that was getting hurt, and there was a version of the abuser that was also not an abuser sometimes, and they're, like,
yeah.
different people, and so we and that ended up being really confusing when they went to prison because I didn't miss the abuser, but I missed the other person that they
Oh,
were, and my mom
yeah.
was so confused by that, and I remember her asking me, like, if I was in love with them, and I just started crying at the fact that she would even think that,
Yeah.
and I was, like, disgusted that the fact that she would think that, and it made me pretend to hate the person so that nobody would ever think that, because I didn't want people to think that that was
You
Yeah.
the
wanted to
case.
be nuanced, but nuance wasn't accepted, and so you decided to be black and white about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't really
I don't know about
realize.
accepted. It seems like your mom just couldn't understand, just didn't have the
Yeah,
framework to even get it.
yeah, and I don't think I
Yeah.
understood that I was disassociating myself and the abuser
Yeah.
either. It took a lot of therapy to even realize that that's what I was doing and how I was able to still, like, miss a part of them, but not the other part. It's kind of
Mhm.
weird. But um yeah, so this bishop was really affirming, kicked the guy out of the ward, and other women from the ward came forward saying he'd done the same to them. So
Wow.
um
Did anything ever
yeah.
happen? Did it,
The
did he
prosecution.
ever? Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Police report or anything.
Even when I told my dad what happened, he was like fuming with like rage about it. And then he found out who the guy's dad was, and it's a really good friend of his. It was like some high up calling in the church. I don't remember what it was. But he's like, oh, he's like a really good man. And like if that's his kid, then like I
I'd
don't
hate
know.
to
I
hurt
don't
his
understand
family.
it. But that was really hurtful for me that like I felt validated. Not that like people need to necessarily rage, but like his
Yeah.
anger towards what happened made me feel really validated. And then him dropping it because of who his dad was made me feel really just not good or protected, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I kind of like played around with the idea of moving to Utah at this time, and I thought that that's something I wanted to do for a long time. I thought I wanted to go to BYU for the longest time because in California, like I mean, BYU is is a school that a lot of like members of the church want to go to or strive to go to. But in California, being able to go to Utah, eventually live there, attend BYU, and if you could get married in like a Salt Lake City temple, that's like the best temple ever. And like that's like how I was raised. I ended up shifting probably around like 13. I liked the University of Utah more. They had a really good writing program at the time, and I was loving writing, and I thought that that's maybe where I wanted to go. Um, So I but BYU had a really good cheerleading team and I loved cheerleading. I did that in high school. And so I kind of like, but I knew I wanted to go to Utah. I had some family here and just the schools and everything. That's like the place to be. This is the place. And so I wanted to leave California where I was going to the beach every Saturday.
Mm.
And that was normal. Now, just like, but yeah, it's very expensive out there and can be scary. But so yeah, I was kind of already like playing with the idea and what at the time I thought was like a spiritual revelation that like I needed to go and I needed to stop pursuing the modeling and acting and singing and just leave it that there might be opportunities for me to do stuff like that in Utah and that I needed to go to Utah, that there was something for me there. And I remember being scared, but like it felt so strong and so real to me. And so within a week's time, I had all my stuff packed. And my aunt said that I could rent a bedroom in her house from her. She said I could stay there for free until I get a job. And then once I get a job and I get my first paycheck, she'll start charging like cheap rent. I can't, it was something really cheap, like $200 a month or something to be in her
Yeah.
house. And I could also eat food with them and all of that. So,
And that was close to the University of Utah.
this was actually Draper.
So what happens next once you get to Draper?
So I move into my aunt's house, and the first day, the guy Colin that I had been messaging is like, "Hey, can I help you like move some of your stuff in? Is there anything that you need help with?" Because I had mentioned to him that I was going, and prior it had just been kind of like, we're getting to know each other kind of thing, but it might not be anything because I was in California and he was in Utah.
Did
But
he
now I
live
was
in
here.
Did he live in the Salt Lake Valley or closer to BYU?
So he lived in Draper, which is also
Oh.
where I moved. And so I was like, yeah, like if you want to help me with some stuff, like you can come over. And then I ended up like getting everything unpacked and in the room and set up the way I wanted it way sooner than I thought I would. And it was in the middle of the week, so he was working and he was gonna come like after work. And I was like, I already got it all set up. Like I was just 18 and did not have a lot of stuff. And so I got everything and he's like, well, do you want me to come pick you up? And maybe we could just like hang out and talk and watch a movie or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I think that would be fun. And so
Real quick, you were talking about kind of being pulled between the 2 colleges, but you hadn't picked one, and Draper, it's almost kind of perfect because 'cause you're basically in the middle, on I-15 between, University of Utah, which is north, and then is that kind of why you did it? Like, just land yourself in the middle and then you either way?
so it actually just kind of like happened to work out that way. I was reaching out to family members to see if there was
Okay.
anyone willing to let me stay with them until I could find another place. I also didn't have a job. I hadn't applied to any colleges, nothing. Like this
Okay.
was fully just, I'm like,
Faith.
God wants me in Utah, is what I felt. And so I just completely moved on faith. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so I like the day that I move in, at this point I cannot afford, you know, BYU or University of Utah. I can't even afford that. So in my mind, I'm thinking like I'll probably have to do like a community college first. And then like because a lot of people started telling me that your associates is going to be like almost the same anywhere you go. And I don't know. And so they were like, you should get your associates at a community college, it'll be cheaper. And then when you move on from there, you could do a university. And a lot of people started teaching me about like how to apply for scholarships and grants and stuff. And you don't want student loans. And I was really scared of loans. I didn't have a credit card, nothing at this point. And so um, that was still kind of a back burner thing. And my main focus was like, I got to find a job so I could help pay towards my aunt's rent in this house.
Yeah.
And so Colin comes in, picks me up that evening, and we end up just going to his house, which I know is like really random because that sounds really creepy to just like go to someone's house like right off the bat. And all of
But you
his
had talked
family
to
is
him.
there. Yeah, I'd been talking to him for a while, and we got to know each other um a lot through FaceTime, but there was still a part of me that was like kind of nervous. What if he's not the same in person? My mom always taught me to watch how a man treats his mother because that's how he'll treat me. And so there's a lot of things you want to like see somebody do and how they interact with people and stuff. So even though I really liked him, I was still nervous. And I had actually told him about a lot of the abuse that I dealt with. And I was nervous to tell him about it because I told guys in the singles ward some stuff before. And as soon as they find out that I'm not a virgin, regardless of whether it was consensual or not, they're out. They're like, nope, not interested. And so I got really nervous to tell Colin because it was like, oh, I'm really liking this guy. And he's also a member. He served a mission in Chile. Like, what if he doesn't like this? And so when I told him, he was like, A, thanked me for feeling comfortable enough to like share that with him. B, that he was so sorry that I had experienced all of that. And that after having these things happen to me for so long, at the point in high school where I was like, I'm gonna like take control over my own body. And I had like a boyfriend in high school who I was sexually active with and all this stuff, which I wouldn't even get to sharing that information with a lot of guys in my singles ward. I would only talk about things that happened to me and they were out. But
Yeah.
I wanted him to know everything. So I was like, I like him a lot, and I'm gonna get really hurt if I tell him later and he's out. I told him all that, and he was like, it's so understandable that you would think that way, that like that would happen to you and that you would want to take back control and do that. He's like, the whole process, because I obviously went in so much more detail with him, but he was like, it makes complete sense as to how your mind would land there and why you would want to do those things. And he's like, and I don't judge you for those things at all. I feel like it was all completely understandable how that happened. And I'm also not trying to seek a relationship with, whoever you were in the past. I'm interested in who you are now and what I do know of you. It's amazing and I like you a lot and I want to continue to get to know you. And those things
He was
don't change
interested in you as
anything.
a person. You were a
Yeah,
person to him. And I think
yeah,
honestly, the men who care about virginity, I I know they'll I think maybe some will balk at this, but they don't care about women as people if they care about that. And that was something that I
That's the value.
I my pro yeah, my projection, like, the trajectory, as I've been very lucky, and then I've never had any sexual experience at all. So I am technically a virgin. I don't like using that word, but I mean, but that's what I am, even now. And
She
but
prefers
early
young
on,
maiden.
yeah, there we go. That works.
Teasing.
No, so I remember I was on a date with a guy where, like, we were talking about this, and I had, he had said that he wanted a virgin, and I was just like, well, what if it wasn't somebody's fault, or what if it was consensual, but they feel bad and they repented, and they're in line with the church standard, and the atonement covers that. So, like, if it's good enough for Jesus, I feel like it should be good enough for us mortals
yeah,
down here. And so the fact that he was just like, I mean, maybe with the abuse, maybe, but definitely not anything consensual. It was one of those few times that just like really hit me in the stomach. And I realized, like, because I was asking, like, okay, but what if this girl you like, again, this is all hypothetical, but she's perfect. Like, she's everything you want. She hasn't told you yet what happened. So you think, as far as you're concerned, she's a virgin, and you want to marry her. You think she's going to be a great mother to your kids. Like, you just everything, all, the rest of your life and eternity. You're like, this person is the one. And then, like, this piece of information is enough to just, like, change it for
Cancel
you
everything.
and throw all of it away. And, when he was just like, "I just feel really strongly that, that I want somebody, who's, pure like me," I think is what he said. And, like, I'm sitting there, technically,
Baffled.
like, pure like him, and I just remember feeling just so disgusted, and I think I didn't have the words for it at the time, but it was objectification. I realized, like, it doesn't matter who I am or who this girl is that he would potentially fall in love with in the future, like, what made her, her, if this one thing would change it, then he could throw her away like a piece of trash, and I couldn't handle it, and that was something that bothered me about being a virgin, because I was like, how am I gonna know if a guy's treating me that way or not? Because if I am in line with what they want, I don't know if they would throw me away or not. And I don't know. Anyway, so that's a little rant from me, but it's really common in the church. It's really frustrating. And so I just want to call it out for what it is. Like, men who care about virgins are wanting objects. They're wanting shiny, brand new in the packaging objects, that's just for them, that's never been used, because objects are used, and not, but we're people, and people aren't used like that. So it's just a really
That's
frustrating
right.
thing to me. And I'm really glad you met Colin.
That's
Colin saw
right.
you
Shout
for who
out to
you were.
Colin.
Yeah,
oh yeah,
as a
he's
person, and
amazing.
like, and so I'm really happy for that. I just wanted to point out that's the difference. Yeah, you're a person to Colin. So,
Yeah, yeah, and I think like some of that information, one of the things that I realized is just like how contradictory the church can be in so many cases. And one
mhm.
of them was I had a lesson with a cupcake,
The
in
lick
Young
cupcake,
Women's where they
chewed
lick the
gum.
cupcake and they tell you, yeah, I think I did I had the chewed gum too at one point as well. And they talk about like, do you want it anymore after somebody's done that? And I'm sitting here at this point having never done anything consensually, and I'm like, no one's
Mm,
gonna want me. And it wasn't my fault. And I'm like trying not to cry in the middle of Young Women's. And then we have another activity where, or lesson where they have like a $20 bill and they put like a tiny tear in it, like who still wants it? They're crumbling it up. Who still wants it? He like puts it on the floor and like stomps on it. Who still wants it? And everybody still wants it. And he talks about how like a lot of times things happen to us in our life and that doesn't change
The
our worth
value.
or whether people want us and stuff. And I'm like, and that lesson made me feel so good. And I'm like, this is
yeah.
completely contradictory to the other
From the same
lessons.
church.
it's from the same church, and I'm just like, I'm trying to remember too, because I'm like, I'm trying to remember if it's the same guy who taught the lesson with the chewed gum, but I might be remembering it wrong because that would be so weird. But
Yeah.
yeah, and so that kind of stuff is really
I mean,
confusing
could
because
be. The
yeah,
church tries to have it both ways, so it could have been the same lesson. I don't think it's that weird, so I just wanted to validate that if that's where
yeah,
your memory is at, because they really wanna hammer the chastity stuff, so they do really wanna make it like once you're
Cover all
not
the
a virgin
bases.
anymore, once you mess up, like, there's permanent things, and yeah, you can come back or whatever, but then if the lesson is on the atonement and it's not Law of Chastity Day, but it's Atonement Day, then it erases everything, turn to Jesus, he can heal you, he can help you, he can save you, forgive you, all of these things. So the
Just
church
like
does want to
there's
have it both ways.
sin in
It could have
general,
been the
they
same
could have
lesson.
a nail in the wood, and if you take the nail out, the sin's gone, but there's still the scar. And then another
Yeah.
lesson will be the nail is in water bucket. If you take the nail out, the water bucket's still there, right? With no
mhm,
nail.
Yeah.
And those
mhm.
are two lessons I remember hearing in the same
Wow.
church, right? That have two different meanings.
Yeah. And I
So
feel
like,
like I
what is it,
realized
church?
that today too, where people will say, I'll say, "Oh, the church is saying XYZ," and everyone's like, "No, the church says XYZ." I'm like, "Yeah, but they're still saying this too, and that doesn't make sense. They don't go together.
Yeah.
You can't have both." Um, but yeah, so that meant a lot to me that Colin reacted in that way. That was like one of the first big things for me, um, where I now felt safe with him and so much more comfortable to just fully be who I was. And I didn't have to be ashamed of, choosing to have sex when I was in high school and choosing these things.
Mhm.
Like, where before I felt so ashamed about it. And he did not care at all. And he's just like, he's like, I mean, I feel like if something like that happened to me, like I completely see how your mind would go there and you would want control back of your own body. And that
Yeah.
makes sense as that's the way you would do it. That makes sense. Like, and so I don't know, he's just always been, and he was like, I've never met anybody who's gone through these things. And I'm like, I bet you have. They just don't talk about it.
Right.
but
Right.
um
That's
but
why I think your story is
yeah,
important, because you might represent hundreds or thousands of women who have remained silent. And that's,
I think
people need to hear
it's
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of why I feel so okay with sharing it. I have some people who are like, this stuff doesn't belong on the internet. This is private. And I'm like, if that's how you feel, then like, don't put it on the internet. I feel differently. And other
Yeah.
people who are willing to share those stories were so impactful to me. It made me feel less alone. And I've always wanted to do that for other people. Um, yeah, so Colin and I, long story short, got engaged 6 weeks after I moved to Utah, and we're married 6 weeks after that. 12
Okay.
weeks total. I look back now, okay, and I'm
Yeah.
like, religion played a big role in how fast that was. Um, but and I think like family pressure a little bit too. Um, my little sister and I to this day talk about how anyone could have been faking a personality for 3 months for 12
Mhm.
weeks. Like, I'm so lucky that neither of us were. Colin
Yeah.
is amazing. I watched him, take care of his mom. His dad passed away before I met him, also from cancer. My mom was going through chemo treatments the same time his mom was going through chemo treatments. We had like a lot
Oh.
of similar things to, relate with.
Yeah.
And
A little bit of trauma
um,
bonding.
yeah, and he he took care of his mom in a way like I've never seen someone like it's almost like those cute old couples you see and they're just like
Mm.
the man is just like helping his, you know, little frail wife into a car and just like taking care of her and like all the stuff. Like that's how I felt when he, was taking care of his mom and he would make sure that the siblings who still lived at home were like taking care of the tasks and things that they were supposed to do to help with the house, like the trash and dishes, making sure everyone was doing their stuff in such a kind way. And it was always about the reasoning behind it was always to like help mom. Like, if you don't do it, mom's gonna do it. Don't make mom have to take out the trash, like, and stuff like that. And he's just always very like, he doesn't yell, he's not aggressive, he's a very just like calm person. He loves to listen, and he doesn't, have conversations just to say what's on his mind and get it out. He really just listens and absorbs information, and sometimes doesn't have anything to say, and it's just like an invite to just have you keep talking, and he's just absorbing it all. And then he just
Good
has,
listener.
yeah, he has really good insight. He's not judgmental of anybody. He's like, you don't know what's going on with them and stuff. And I feel like I've always been that way too. And so we just had so much in common. Our views of what we wanted, of just like, we wanted to get married in the temple. We wanted to be sealed and have like kids. And we talked about how many kids we wanted. And we talked about politics, which were so hard for me because I just wanted to ignore politics, because in my growing up, politics are just like a big reason why people fight. So I was like, I don't want to know anything. And I just like didn't. That's changed at this point, but it might not be surprising, but I land like so much in the middle on so many topics. I'm like, I get why you're saying this, and I get why you're saying this. I don't know where to go. But
at least
yeah,
you're
and my
more
husband's the same
knowledgeable
way.
now about the politics.
Yeah.
Was he?
Yeah. I had to learn the importance.
Was Colin going to school? He was at BYU, right? Or
Yeah, so he was at Slick. So that's Salt Lake Community College. He was taking classes through them, and he was working. And so he kind of encouraged me to do Slick as well. And I just did online courses. And I did a little bit of college classes while I was in high school too. So I went to what's called like Merced Community College. And that's just like a little place in Central California. And I did human development classes, child development classes. I love psychology and neuroscience and all that stuff. I just love how people work. I love people. I love body language. I love all of it. So that's kind of what I did. I never got any degree. I ended up stopping classes. I think from memory, I think it was just like I realized that I was taking a lot of classes more for fun, and I didn't have any career interests where a degree was necessary. I was still interested and still am today in like modeling, acting, and singing. I love YouTube. I've thought about doing YouTube since I was in high school. And I just like that kind of stuff. I thought about like wanting to maybe open my own daycare one day because I love working with kids. Ended up realizing I loved nannying more. I liked smaller groups of children, more one-on-one stuff. And so I did that for a while. I was a CNA for a little bit, and I hated that. I hated that so much.
Yeah.
I got like $10 an hour to change.
It's a tough job.
All day. Yeah, and it like there were so many rules that people were not following. Where like you need to help. You need 2 people to help like lift and move certain people, and they're like, you should be able to do it by yourself. And I'm like, okay. Anyway, I hated that. So I did that for a little, but that's when I came home like crying one day, and I quit, and I started nannying. Once I had a parent reach out, and I did an interview with their family, and they were like, yes, we want you to work for us. I was like, bye to CNA and like started nannying. But yeah, so Colin and I got sealed and married in the Salt Lake City temple on April 7th of 2018.
A week ago.
Yeah.
So
The
yeah,
anniversary.
we just had
Happy
our
anniversary.
anniversary. Thank you. um, but yeah, so we got married. Just kind of did like the typical young married thing where we kind of bounced between different like basement apartments. Once the lease was up, we went to another basement apartment
Hmm.
and just did that for a while. The following year, I found out I was pregnant. And basically what happened, I was on like a birth control pill, and when I was due for a refill, the person who prescribes it, the doctor, was on vacation and they couldn't get a hold of him to like refill it. So I was without it for 10 days and I got pregnant
And you
in
thought
like that
nothing could happen
time.
in these 10 days.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know. I think we knew like it could happen, but we also like didn't think that it would. I don't know.
That's right. And God wants you to have children anyway.
I think I was
There are
always
spirits
the one in
waiting to
our
come
marriage to
down.
say that. Yeah, my husband was much more lax, like on everything, and I was like, "Why are you not wearing your garments?" Like he would wear them, but like if he ever didn't, I was like,
Like,
"Excuse
what's going
me,
on?
slippery
I
slope.
married a man
Yeah.
of God." Yeah, and he, yeah. So, and that's the year where like I was pregnant and my mom ended up passing away from cancer. And I remember like I was hoping that she would make it to the birth of my baby so she could at least be there for that. And my she was born in November. My mom passed away in June. So, but we knew it was coming.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was really hard, especially with like pregnancy hormones and stuff like that. It was
Yeah.
just a lot. And I couldn't get images of her out of my head of her just like getting sicker and sicker because she like starts to not look like herself. She couldn't talk anymore because she was on oxygen and still didn't have enough of it to be able to even speak. So she'd be like hunched over and her breath was like all rattly, and she would write on a whiteboard sometimes, but then she got to the point where she couldn't even like lift her arms to write on a whiteboard. It was like that was the hardest part of all of it. That was harder than her actually passing away. It was like watching that happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really hard, and so I dealt with a lot of, I forgot what they call it. So postpartum depression is like after you have your baby, but they have a name for depression that you can experience while you're pregnant too, and I forget what it's called.
I don't know. My
Um,
guess would be like
but
gestational depression, but like
yeah,
it's
or
something
prenatal or something. I don't know.
or something.
Um,
Yeah.
Postpartum.
but yeah, I was really having a hard time, and I remember when I had the baby, I was so scared that something might happen to her, and I think I just had, like, a fear of, like, death type stuff after that happened,
Mhm.
and I was like, "What if I have her and then that happens?" And so I was scared. I was actively trying to force myself to not feel anything, even though I was very honestly, like,
Oh, yeah.
in love with her, but I was trying to separate myself in case something were to happen, because I
Oh,
thought in my head, like, it would hurt less if I did that,
yeah.
and I did that the whole time I was in the hospital, so that was just, like, 48 hours or so, but by the time I brought her home, I was like, "Okay, like, she's okay," like, and I
Yeah.
can feel whatever I want to feel.
Yeah.
I think it was all there the whole time. I was just, like, convincing myself that there was some barrier, but,
Yeah.
like, having the idea of my mom being there in spirit was really helpful for me because I was like, "Oh, she is here, like, she did see my baby, and she did see all this stuff," and now kind of, like, flash forward, I don't know necessarily how I feel about all that stuff or if I believe that that's a thing, but I do know
Yeah.
that believing that it was very
Yeah.
helpful for me in
It was
processing all of
yeah,
that.
beautiful and
So,
helpful.
yeah. So, yeah, as far as our, marriage goes, Yeah, I was always the one to, be making sure that we were wearing garments, making sure we were going to church still.
Mm.
Especially after having kids, it was much harder to go to
Yeah.
church, but we still would. And my husband would just like obviously be in like high stress mode every time we had to like get them ready and go to church. Um, we ended up finding out our daughter has autism, and so that kind of explained a lot of stuff. Like with her at church, she had so many sensory problems with going to church. She did not like all the people. If it was completely silent, she needed to make like some type of noise so that it wasn't fully silent. But then if
Mhm.
everybody's like talking, like at the end, they do a closing prayer
Yeah.
and everybody gets up and you start hearing like talking in motion, she would freak out and just be covering her ears and sort of like crying. But she loved the music. When the music was
Mm.
on, she was just like happy. And I've always connected so much with music. And so it's like, oh my gosh, she loves music like me. We would turn on the Tabernacle Choir on the TV on Sundays, and she would just sit there and stare at them. Like, and I remember thinking
Aw,
like it was so
yeah.
beautiful. I was like, and she every time she would stare at the ceiling, I was like, um, I'd be like, "Do you see angels? Can you see angels?" And I would ask her about like I genuinely always believed in there being like a spiritual realm, and I always believed and felt like it was so thin for me, and that I just had like this special connection to that, and that's just how I
Yeah.
felt for a long time. Um, yeah, and so a lot of the stuff was very important to me, and there were little things that I didn't understand, like um, LGBTQ plus rights in the church. That was so confusing for me from the beginning. I'd never understood why
Mm.
that was a thing, and why two consenting adults couldn't have rights to be together regardless of whatever their sexual orientation is, or you know, or people who don't want to get married. And the celestial kingdom, you're supposed to get married and be sealed in the
Yeah.
temple, and some people don't want that. And
Yeah.
so that was really confusing for me. I had told Colin while we were dating, I wanted him to know, in case this is like a weird thing for you, that I've had attraction for women before. I've never done anything about it other than like pornography related stuff that and I was like, but I've talked to the bishop about that kind of stuff and I've never done anything about it. But I just wanted you to know that like those feelings have been there like since I was a little kid. And
Mm.
but I always knew that I wouldn't do anything about it because that's not what you're supposed to do. And so
Yeah.
it was helpful for me that I also had attraction for men. And I just
Yeah.
always knew I would marry a man because that's what I was told. So I wanted him to know that because I didn't know if that would be weird for him. And he's like, that is not a problem for me. And he's like, I think I love you more. I was like,
Oh, no.
oh my gosh.
It's different. Yeah,
Um,
it's different for
it's like
guys.
yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, I was really nervous to tell you that. So I'm glad that I don't have to worry
So
about that.
I
And
was
then,
actually thinking that with your mom and with the birth of your baby, that maybe that's where things would like have started to maybe unravel for you, but it sounds like
Later.
you
it
were
didn't.
stronger than ever, it seems.
Yeah, I would picture my mom and my husband's dad, who had passed away as well, forming a friendship in heaven because of Colin and I's now sealed marriage. And now
Mm.
they're both grandparents to this baby we just made, and they are so happy. And my new daughter like was just in heaven with them, and they were taking care of her before
Yeah,
we got her,
kind of the Saturday's Warrior kind of a thing.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
like a really big thing for me. And that was I mean, that felt so good to me thinking about that because even though it was hard that I couldn't see her and I couldn't see her holding my baby, feeling like I knew that she had and that she can see them and that she's proud of
Yeah.
me and where I'm at, like was very fulfilling for me.
So
So
you seem
yeah,
like somebody that people would look at and would just never guess in a million years
never.
that
I mean, my
that
family was
was.
shocked. Yeah. My older sister had kind of gone inactive, mostly because she was bored. She didn't like going. Like, she just
Mm,
felt like it was a whole thing. She hated garments. Um, her bishop told her that her previous husband cheated on her because she didn't wear her garments
mm,
and all this stuff. So she's like, no, like, F this place. I'm
yeah,
out. Like, and so, um, but she doesn't know like hardly anything about like the history or anything. She's like, I just didn't like it.
yeah.
My older
So what
brother kind of went, oh, go ahead.
oh, no, I was just gonna say, so what like, what was it for you?
So for me, so this just happened
So
a
let's
little over a
actually
year ago.
let's put a pin in it for a second and just
Mhm.
say in 3 weeks it'll be your third anniversary of your first podcast about doing makeup. So you started a YouTube channel about doing makeup first, or
Oh
other
yeah,
things that you wanted to
Yeah.
share with people. I wanted to
true.
Was
let
that
people
part of
know
the
that you
story?
Yeah,
that's
and
how she
I
got
guess
into
in a way it is.
podcasting.
Yeah, so I actually, this actually, that's actually a really good point that I might have not even made that connection myself. Um, but yeah, I'd always wanted to do YouTube, and my husband was very much so like, he's like, if you want to do the traditional stay at home and I take care of the family, perfect. If you want a job and you want to get a nanny, great. If you want a job from home and you want to be with them, great. If you want to homeschool them, great. If you want them to go to school, great. He's like, I
That's awesome.
fully trust what you want to do. He's I mean, he's like that today. He's very chill. He wants people to be authentic to who they are. He wants people to go after the things that they want, like, and he will encourage you to do so if like he cares about you, like he's going to tell you like you should do this, you know? And
It's almost
so
like he wants you to be the best Payton Haws that you possibly can be.
for sure, 100%, like that's, I think that's probably one of his big things that he pushes every day, like, and listen to your body. If you need rest, rest. If you want to work and you want to like go for something, like do it. Like, I got your back in whatever you want. He's always making sure I'm taking care of myself, and I try to make sure he's taking care of himself, and we're really good together, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's the one who kind of encouraged me to start my YouTube channel. And at the time I was really interested in pursuing makeup, and I loved makeup throughout high school. I would follow all of the big beauty gurus like Jaclyn Hill and Nikki Tutorials, and I don't know if you, if never fell down the makeup realm, you might not know who they are at all, but I loved them. And in makeup, I have pictures of me where I just like caked so much makeup on my face as a kid with the thickest eyebrows in the world and like the winged eyeliner and fake lashes all the time. It was like a lot. But I really loved it, and I wanted to become professionally certified because I was like, that could be a fun little like side job I have, where just if anybody wants to make up them for their wedding, especially being in Utah, weddings are happening all the
Yeah.
time, and
And
I
very
could kind of do
flexible.
it cheaper. Yeah. Or I could
That's
be
good as a
home with my
mom.
kids because
Yeah.
I really want to be home with my kids. And I still want that. So yeah, and so I went to school to become certified for as a professional makeup artist, and it's called like Chic Studios is the company that I went through, and I got my certification. Oh my gosh, it was so easy for me because I knew so much about makeup. Every single test that I did, I never missed a question. I never had to go back and redo anything. I got 100% on everything the first time. Like, I was very knowledgeable in all of that. It was just about practicing on other people because I'd really only done myself and worked on my own skin and stuff.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share my looks that I was doing with my school on YouTube. I was like, I could do my makeup and talk about what our assignment was and all this stuff, just kind of share what it's going on. And I did that for a little while, and then um, I kind of felt like I wanted to share more than just makeup. And I was like, it'd be fun to share just what's going on in my life. And so I started doing little clips on social media of like a sped up clip of me like cleaning up after my kids because it's like
Mm.
satisfying to watch a mess like go to clean and
Uh-huh.
like organizing stuff because I love that too. I've had people pay me to come like clean and organize stuff. I just I'm obsessed with the home edit and I like color coordinate everything. I'm diagnosed OCD and it's very severe. So and I'm on medication
Mm.
for it. So I'm really good at that kind of thing. Um yeah, so I started sharing little like short clips like that and then it ended up turning into almost like blog style stuff with my family and I was like maybe I'll do stuff like that because I
A
followed
mommy
other
blogger.
family channels. Yeah, I followed other
Almost,
like mommy blogger type
yeah.
things and not
They
Ruby
had a
Frankie, I'll
heyday.
tell you that.
Right,
Didn't watch
right, yeah,
Ruby
no, there was
Frankie.
it was, like, kinda everywhere. Yeah, there was, I think, a heyday, which I think because of Ruby Frankie and other allegations or things, just the the pressure on the kids and the, yeah, the image and stuff,
Mhm.
but
Might have
anyway,
tailed
yeah,
off.
but that would have
Yeah.
been totally, like, normal for, yeah, for you
Yeah.
to start heading that direction.
Yeah, and I actually got asked so I get nannying jobs occasionally. I have like a care.com account and that's like you can find babysitters and nannies and stuff like that on there. And I get a lot of occasional jobs and right
Mm.
now even I'll still nanny from time to time, but I just do it from my home. So if anybody needs one and they're willing to bring them to my house, like I do that. And it could be as needed, it could be occasional, it could be full time, whatever. And so I had someone reach out and ask if I could go to their home. And at this time, my husband, he was working for Coinbase, and that's like a big tech company. They did a lot of cryptocurrency stuff, and that crashed. And they laid off 5,000 employees, and he was a part of it.
Mm.
And they paid him out for like 3 months. And we, of course, paid tithing on that. So that took a lot of that out. Yeah, yeah. So the regrets. Okay. The
Yeah.
regrets.
Well,
Um,
because you need the blessings more than ever. That's kind of how
I
they,
know.
yeah, suck
I
you in on
know.
that, yeah.
And my husband hated tithing the whole time since we were married. And I was the one that
Mm.
was like, we have to, we have to, we have to. And he was like, but and so since he wasn't working and he was still actively looking for another job, I was like, I could go to this person's home and like watch their kids. Turns out they're a big YouTube family in Utah. I signed an NDA, so I cannot share who it is, but big family channel, whatever. And so now I'm there Monday through Friday, morning to evening, helping them sometimes film, sometimes just helping with the littles, getting people ready for videos, um, decorating and redoing like bedrooms, and then pretending that the mom did it all. And all of us nannies, there's 3 nannies in the house, did it,
Oh, wow.
and all of the stuff. So that was like my job, and I learned how how they structured filming schedules and how they were able to get out. I was able to see their YouTube studio and how much money they were making, and my eyes just about fell out of my head. I did not think it's like that people can have that much money, but then you're like,
Mhm.
okay, I don't even make this much a year in how much they're making in 1 month off ads alone, and I know they have like sponsorships that they get all the time
Right.
that pay them even more, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. And I started like filming so much more at my house. I was followed a similar schedule to them, but just like less intense because they post like way more.
Mm.
But I was like, I'll do like a weekly one and I'll try and like post the stuff, whatever. Ended up starting my deconstruction while I was working for them. I came across a Mormon stories uh, episode. I can't even remember which one it was. I started watching a few of them, And the one that like stood out the most right off the bat, I'm forgetting their names, but they have a YouTube channel now. It's a guy who was born and raised in the FLDS church, and his wife was born in the LDS church.
Oh, was it the growing
And
up in polygamy? They have their
yeah,
yeah. Is
yeah,
that it?
yeah. So yeah, there's okay. This was insane to me. The similarities between the FLDS and the LDS teachings, and how people. I'm like, oh my gosh! Everybody, my whole life growing up in California, no one knows what being Mormon is, and you like share it, and people are like, you're being brainwashed, and I was like, that's so offensive. Or you're in a cult, and I'm like, that's so offensive. Or you believe you're gonna get your own planets, and I was like, no, we don't. You're reading weird stuff and something about Kolob, and I'm like, I've never heard of that before. Don't you think I would hear of that if I was in church? And I'm sitting here listening to all this stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like grooming and it's brainwashing. And I'm like, that's what they do to us too. Just like kind of like a little bit different, but like basically the same. And that's insane. And I was like,
So this wasn't the first
uh-huh.
one, but this is the one that like
Impactful.
made an impact.
It was the
That
first
that
one that like
clicked.
really stood out. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I showed my husband. So we have this thing like since we've been married where a lot of times we will have something on the TV as we're like going to sleep together. As long as our schedule like allows us to like go to sleep together, we'll usually have something playing. And
Mhm.
we went through a phase where like every single night we were like hitting play on wherever we left off on these episodes because some of them can be like 5 hours long.
Yeah.
And so we would like go through them, which was like awesome, but you can't just like sit and watch a whole one. So we would like press play on wherever we left off. And that was like the first one that really had us like spiraling. And when the wife, I feel bad that I'm not remembering their
It's
names, but
Sam and
when
Melissa. I think that's
oh
who.
yeah,
Yeah.
Melissa. Yeah. So when Melissa talked about like how they were preparing for a talk and they, wanted to study more about this talk, thinking like, oh, our testimony is going to be strengthened through researching this stuff and realizing like the
Mm.
complete opposite happened and their testimony just fell. That was kind of similar to us, except we weren't preparing a talk. It's just we were getting this information and we think that, oh, we're going to learn about this and try to understand it more and realize that it just had everything falling down, like everything came crashed. That's like the thing about like your shelf broke in a way.
Yeah.
Was kind of through that. And
So I wonder, how did you start watching Mormon stories then? If you
it
weren't.
came up on like my feed. It
Mhm.
came up on one of my YouTube recommended feeds, and I think because it was about FLDS, I
Okay.
wasn't concerned about them saying like stuff
Yeah.
about the Mormon church because I'm like, oh, I've always been kind of intrigued about the FLDS. I didn't know that that was a thing until I moved to Utah when I was 18. I
Right.
never heard of that
But you
before.
said that wasn't the first one you had started watching, right? That you had seen a few episodes before that? So,
Yeah,
um
I actually have a playlist on my YouTube channel where I was putting stuff like it's a privated playlist of
mhm.
ones that I realized were really standing out to me, and I think I put
Yeah.
them in
'Cause I
order from
think
which
'cause
ones I
you had come
started.
across the Mormon stories earlier, but then once you realized, like, the interview you were watching with someone who left the church, you were like, "Nope, I'm out." So something different
Yeah.
happened this time for you not to click out. So I'm kinda curious about that because, and the same thing happened to me. Anytime Mormon stories came up, it didn't really stay in my head what the channel was, but I know as a TBM, if it even looked like it was somebody who left, I just clicked off
Yeah.
it, wasn't interested. So I only landed back there after I already started deconstructing, and so it seems like you were there a
Yeah.
little bit before, or maybe there was something kind of happening in the back of your mind a little bit? I don't know. So
Yeah,
that's
I
why I'm
found
curious.
so I just
Like,
found
was
the
there a particular issue maybe that you were questioning? Is that what you're getting
um
to, Maven?
it looks like so I have like this privated playlist that I like put episodes in here that like made a really big impact on me. And so these are
Mhm.
all like the first ones I started watching. And
Okay.
I think the first one is actually his name is Kyle. It's When a Gay Mormon Marries a Woman, part 1.
Kyle
And
Ashworth.
So I remember actually listening to this in my earbuds while I was working at their house as a nanny. I was like cleaning up some stuff around, and I had this in, and I was curious about the gay Mormon marries a woman because I'd
Right.
heard stories of people doing that, and I thought that was so sad because the LGBTQ plus thing was like an area that was always like, I don't agree and I don't understand. And even my mom would tell me like she felt like it's something that she won't be able to understand until she like is in heaven and it's all revealed to her, you know. And that was always actually really helpful for me to fall back on. If I didn't know, I was like, I'll know one day. It doesn't matter. So
Okay.
that
So
was
you're
really
We'll
intriguing.
find out
tuning into
someday.
stories, of like people whose experiences you're curious about, and then I think we're a little bit safe because it's different from you and it wasn't like obviously church
And you're
related.
trying to
That's what it sounds
understand.
like.
You're
Empathy,
just
yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
understand their human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
Kyle's the host of Latter Gay Stories, and so we can put a link
Yeah.
to that in there as well. Yeah. Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
And
Sorry I kind of stopped. I was just curious how that got
no,
going.
yeah,
So
that's a
okay.
good point. And I think that like
Yeah.
helps give a lot of clarification too, because I had seen a Mormon stories thing like the Jesse Clark Funk thing like years prior, and I was like, no way. Once I heard them saying bad things about the church, I got off. And
Yeah.
so after I watched that one, I came across what's her name's Haley Everts, I think. She wrote
Yeah.
the like Why I left
Influencer.
the Mormon Church and Came Back.
That's
So
right.
that's the first time I ever heard of the CES letter. I was like, what's the CES letter? And I asked my husband about it. He'd never heard of it. So he starts watching this with me. She has like a similar story where like she like was sexually active with people and kind of went back and forth between like whether or not she felt like it was whatever or if it like really mattered
Your
and she
fault.
shouldn't do that. Like, and I just like related to her, and it was the CES letter. I was like, what is this like? And so my husband pulls it out like as soon as we finish the episode, he pulls it out. I just go to bed and he
stays up
reads
all night.
all of it. And the next morning he's like, I'm done. And I was like,
wow.
oh, like that scared me. He went a little bit faster than I did. And I was like, what's in it? Like, what is it? And he's like telling me things. And when he starts talking about the Joseph Smith putting a rock in a hat and like the plates not actually being used during the translation process, I was like, that does not make sense. And I was like, and that was a really, really big thing for me because that tears down the entire church. If you lose faith and trust in Joseph Smith and who he was as a person, like could he have been making all this up or just pretending?
Yeah.
Then that takes everything else. Because people ask me all the time, so you lost your faith in Joseph Smith, like why do you have to remove everything else? I'm like, because I now hold the opinion that he wrote the Book of Mormon himself and he was not dumb. Like and so
it's so different than what we were told. It's shocking. It's genuinely shocking.
And if you tell most people that in the church now, they're like, what are you talking about? I never heard of that. But and like somebody talks about the second anointing. I don't remember what episode that's in, but my little brother came across an episode that talked about that, and he asked my aunt about it because he lives with my aunt and uncle. They're like his legal guardians. It's a whole different story. And my uncle that he lives with is a bishop, and this uncle, he's like one of the best people on the planet that I know, but like he asked like my aunt like about the second anointing and why is that a thing, and she was like, that's not real and you're reading
It's got to be
stuff that like
anti-Mormon
people are
lies.
making up. Yeah. And she was just like, I think she made a comment about how like he's watching too many of my videos, and he goes, I haven't even watched any of her videos yet. I've just been watching Mormon stories. Like, and
so anyhow, so your husband says in one day he's out. And how long does it take for you to to go from there?
Well, that scared me because I was also feeling like I don't know what all of this is and what it means. And he's all of a sudden like, I'm done. And he's like, I want to remove my records. And I was like,
Oh,
because I was like, what if we're
that's very
wrong? Like,
fast.
yeah, he would. I mean, he was always like way more like, oh, tithing's annoying and oh, the garments are annoying.
Mm,
And I was like, so like I was not ever judgy about other people about it. I felt like people live their own lives, like to each their own. But this impacts like me and our family. So like you gotta be doing those things. And so but he was always that way. And for him, like finding out all this stuff, he's a very like logical person. And so if you put like evidence in front of him and give
yeah.
him research and links and like citations, he's gonna like fall down a rabbit hole doing all of that. And he was
It
like,
seems like you were still at least kind of open because a lot of spouses will like completely shut down at that point, cut off any kind of contact or not contact, but just any discussions about anything anti-Mormon. And so it seems like you weren't there or did
yeah,
Still,
there.
were you thinking that your eternal life was at stake now? Because he's supposed to bring you into
well,
heaven.
yeah. I was like, what if it's wrong? What if we're wrong? And like, what happens to me and the kids now? Like, if you remove your records and there's no sealing, where do I go? Am I automatically sealed back with like my dad again, or am I just like alone with? Do I get to still have the kids with me, or not? And I had so
Or are
many
you free to
questions
maybe
about what
feel
happened.
yourself to Joseph Smith in the future?
Oh,
It's
yeah,
wild.
not
Yeah.
really, um, but yeah, I just still had so many. I think I was scared if it wasn't true, because it
Because
was
it's
my
all you
whole
knew.
life. Like I would, if somebody like threatened my life and said to like say something like the church isn't true or whatever, I would have
Risk your life.
absolutely risked my life, left my family, and known that I would have been blessed for standing up for the church in the afterlife. That's how much it meant to me. And my husband was like, no, you and the kids are like my number one, and God comes next. And I was like, no, God's supposed to come first. And he's like, no, not for me. Like, if that's how it is for you, like, that's okay. That I understand. And he's like, that's not how it is for me. And I remember being like, I did not like
Right?
it was just like a weird thing for me. So for him, I think
Do we belong to the same
it
church?
yeah.
Yeah.
And he I don't know, he's a research person. And the CES letter has citations and
It's got the
Right.
links
all of
and
this stuff.
everything.
It's got all the stuff
Yeah.
and it has church approved links and
And
citations.
also,
And he's like, mm-mm.
Colin is a person that you respect. You feel that he respects you, and you trust him, but yet
Mhm.
the world is crumbling in a way at the same time.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like it honestly felt as confusing and painful to me as losing my mom to cancer because my mom was like my best friend. So losing her and having to have kids without her being here was obviously so difficult. And a lot of people can relate to that. But losing everything that I thought my life was going to be, realizing how much time and dedication I put towards the church and everything that like my whole life is built on it. Like that is my foundation for everything. We pray about every job we get, everything that
Mhm.
I do is around, what the church would say about it and what do I think God would do in this scenario.
And so
So for
is he like teaching you like every day more things as you're going?
we're kind of doing it together still. Like he's pretty firm in like being done. And we were documenting all of this on my YouTube channel too. So I have a playlist called Faith Crisis. And there's a part one where I'm like very active in the church. but I'm like, I think I'm just like a progressive Mormon, I think.
And you're like in
like
your
I just
car,
like
right?
and I just yeah, I'm in my car and I just barely learned what that meant.
And it's just a
I didn't know
short
what
part one. It's
progressive
like 2 minutes
or
long, and you're just like saying these things.
yeah, and then you
So
slowly
this is
see
real
like over the course
time.
of the videos that I'm like learning new things and I'm just sharing like how I feel about what I'm learning. And it's like you can see the
21 minutes. I
spiral
mean,
over
yeah.
like a few months. Yeah, it was a lot. And even though my husband got there quicker and I was really nervous about it, my nerves were more just based around like what if I'm wrong and what the church says about what happens to you if you leave
Mm.
and what you're risking. And I was like not so confident yet and it scared me. But
What kind of, like,
really I just
feedback were you getting, and did that affect where you were going? Did that affect the crisis at all, or was it all
um so I would talk with some people. I started talking with my little sister and found out that
mm,
she knew about a lot of this stuff. And I was like, why didn't you tell me any of this? And she's like, well, I just figured it would either be rude because you're perfectly happy in what you're doing,
mm,
or it would just go in one ear out the other because, like, what do I know? And I was
yeah, if
like,
you're not ready?
she's
Well, I mean,
probably right.
your channel, like, publicly, because if you're publicly kind of going through your faith crisis, I would imagine that you probably had some really polarizing comments from either side.
Oh, yeah. I had most of my family reach out to me privately
Mm,
and did not like it. Were very,
and they saw through your videos, most of them. Okay.
yeah. One, I would kind of Marco Polo my dad who raised me a lot, and then I would video chat my biological dad. I kind of would talk to both of them,
Mhm.
and my dad who raised me had never heard of like the hat. He's like, I don't know about that. Like, I've never heard that before, and he was like very comfortable saying like, I don't know. Or my biological dad, um, which I think he would say to this day, like he regrets how harsh he was with his words and statements. There's even a recent video on my channel where I talked about it. I think it's like telling my family I'm leaving the Mormon church. And I share some of the things that he said with me. We actually had a shared document. He was like, write out a lot of your questions and concerns and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I was writing them out and he responded to them in like a different color. And then he's like, go look at them. And so then we would respond in another color on the same document, like things back. And it got kind of bad. Like he started comparing people from the LGBTQ plus community to like pedophiles and stuff. And I had to talk
Ooh,
about like brain
yeah.
development and why children can, it doesn't matter and all of this
Right.
stuff. And I got really upset, and he was saying, like, that I was risking, like, my children's salvation, and it kinda made me feel like he was saying that, like, they were gonna go to hell basically because I chose to
Yeah.
leave, and even though he didn't directly say that, it kind of felt like that was insinuated, and we stopped talking for a little while. And I actually shared the document with 2 other family members of mine, um, and they read it and called him each of them called him and were like, how dare you like talk
Like
to
you're
her that
wrong.
way? And they both also disagree with me leaving, the people who called him.
Mhm.
But they were like,
Mm.
you don't talk to somebody like that. You don't do that. And he was very like, he was brought to tears and like realizing that his, even though
Attitude.
he believes a lot of the things he said, the way he delivered the information was like very disrespectful.
Mhm.
And so now we don't have a lot of deep conversations through like documents or text messages, and we just video chat so you can see like body language and tone and everything. But that was like a whole thing. And so I shared some of that document. It would be a very long video if I shared that whole document
Mm.
on my channel, but
Yeah.
if people want it, I will. So, but yeah, so a lot of people are reaching out to me, and uh, when my husband decided to leave, I actually filmed him calling family members. And I didn't
Yeah.
share like who he was calling. I didn't share their voices or what they were saying or anything like that, just like out of respect for their privacy. But I got like him on the phone just saying like, I just want you to know like I love you guys, and like I'm leaving the church. I have done a lot of research. I don't believe it anymore. And he's like being brought to tears, and he's like, I hope that this doesn't change anything with you guys, and I still want to be in everyone's lives, and I still respect everybody's beliefs. I just wanted everybody to know where I stood, and just called multiple family members to tell them, and everybody was just like, we love you for who you are. That changes nothing. Like, you're amazing, all this stuff. Where I have people my side just saying like, what are you doing? You're ruining your life, you're ruining your children's life, like all this stuff. And I'm like, I just like,
Yeah.
I felt lucky to have his family like supporting in that way, and was kind of sad that I didn't feel like I received the same thing in return.
Yeah.
And
And
even some people
going back to what you
Right.
said earlier, you're a words of affirmation girl. So that's kind of the flip side of that is that when praise means a lot to you, disappointment, others have in you is also really difficult.
Hard.
So I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
words are hard for me, and delivery is important. And I mean, you got to grow. You got to get some thick skin when you're sharing a bunch of stuff on the internet. I have one
right.
specific hater that comments on almost every video to tell me
Oh no.
about like how I look, and I'm just like, okay, like, and it
But people who
means so much
matter,
more. It's
yeah,
people who matter to me that's important, and that it has a bigger impact for people who know me. And so, yeah, that happened. But he apologized, and we mended things. But for a while, I did question whether or not I was interested in even maintaining a relationship if I was going to be spoken to that way regularly. Or, and I think I had a hard time with the fact that like, even though his delivery was also could have been better, a lot of the things that he said, knowing that even though he even though he could have delivered it better, that what he said is still his belief.
yeah,
And that was really hard, because I want people to believe whatever they believe, but when it's about me and my family, and I feel like people feel bad for me or feel sorry for me when I don't feel like people need to feel sorry for me, and it's like a weird dynamic. But yeah, I basically just kept falling down the rabbit hole of like Mormon story stuff. I watched a lot of the LDS discussion stuff where they talk about Joseph Smith's treasure digging history and all of that. And a lot of my issues were around Joseph Smith, the translation process, the treasure digging, the polygamy. I knew about polygamy growing up, but it was taught to me very differently. That like it
mhm,
wasn't just the Mormon church practicing, it was culturally just like how people did things. That's what I thought. And like times changed, and that's not a thing anymore. But it wasn't just our church, like everybody was doing that, and we learned and adjusted. That's not true. Okay. And so I just
yeah, yeah,
later learned, and then about like the 14-year-old that he married and marrying other people's wives, and like, you know, people talking about what's it called? Just certain relations that they had with him,
mm,
and the affidavits that
okay,
people signed about their relations with him and everything. And I was just like, this is, and everything contradicts, because he said sometimes he would talk about how it was just for like the sealing power, but then he also said that it was to multiply and replenish the earth, but then he never had children with any of them. And then
yeah,
there's so many things that don't make sense. And I was like, I don't believe him. And so I asked my dad at one point, I was like, why do you believe that Joseph Smith was hated by a lot of people and martyred and all this stuff? And he believed that it was because, like, long story short, that it was because he said he saw Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ as two separate beings, and no one was saying that. And I was like, everything I'm looking up says that it's around like his polygamy practices and stuff like that, and like, and people
and
didn't like how he was
fraud,
doing.
and
Yeah, and
yeah,
so I'm like, yeah, and I'm like, I don't feel like, I don't know, because where I feel like I'm being revealed, like all this information is like being revealed to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I trust or believe Joseph Smith anymore. um I'm like, do I still believe in God? And I was like, yeah, I still believe in God, because like I can feel that. And so we were looking at like non-denominational Christian type stuff, and like, but then we realized that a lot of the same tools that you use to deconstruct the Mormon church also applied to a lot of other religions that we were looking into, specifically like Christianity and stuff. And we were like, I was like, why is like the feeling I get or the miracles that happen in my life have to be God? If there's no explanation, it doesn't have to be God. It's just always been explained that way to us. So I'm like, oh, this what he's done for me in my life is undeniable, and what I feel when he has like his hand in my life is undeniable. I'm like, that's just how it was taught to me. Like, these things really could just be happening, and I could just have feelings. It doesn't have to be God that is doing those things. And that was hard for me. My husband was like doing the same things, and he had been like reading different like translations of the Bible and stuff. And when he started realizing that those same things could apply to the Bible and a lot of the contradictory stuff in the Bible, and like, he's like, I believe like Jesus was a person that walked the earth, but like the whole being resurrected and the whole idea of all of that, he's like, I just don't believe that anymore. And so he's like now referring to himself as atheist. And that scared me, because growing up, like, I think of the atheist, I just picture like darkness around the person. And I used to think it
That's
was
how I
people
was
who
raised
like,
too.
yeah,
Pure
yeah.
evil. Like,
I was like, oh
atheist is
my gosh.
like God hater, God fighter,
The
just
worst of the
all the
worst.
bad. Yeah.
I
I
thought he
literally
like
thought that was
prayed
the worst
Satan.
thing that could happen to me. Like, I would when I was a
Hmm.
teenager, I would have thought that I would rather die young than keep living if I were to become, exactly what I am right now. So, yeah,
Yeah. And
that was scary.
that was hard. And when he was like using that term, I was like, it got like kind
Uh-uh.
of really nervous.
And at the
And
same time, Payton, you have been able to hold space for people in any stage of their faith, right? And now
yeah,
somebody's like faithless. The question is, can you
yeah,
hold space for him still for a little bit, right?
yeah. And I think for me, even though I was kind of feeling the same things he was, I was too scared emotionally because I didn't want that to be true. I was like, the idea of after we die being with our families forever and ever is sounds like exactly what I want. I don't
What could
want
be
this to
better than
end. I
that,
love my
right?
family. Yeah. And so if that's not real, like, I don't want that to be real. That's scary. And my husband's like, well, if you think about it, like, before we were born, there's no memory. It's not like you're walking around in a dark room with nobody for infinite forever. Like, there's it's not, because I think when people say there's nothing, I would picture myself surrounded by nothing forever. And it's like, wait. And
It's
he's
hard
like,
to
no.
yeah.
Yeah. And so he kind of, I think that has to this day kind of landed me in a spot of kind of being like agnostic leaning atheist, where like I don't feel like I believe that there's anything, but there's still like a piece of me that like likes the idea or hopes that maybe
Mhm.
there could be something. And I kind of, I mean, we fell in love with science way more than ever before when this happened.
Yeah.
And so,
Right.
like, so much of what can't be explained yet scientifically, I'm like, what if there is some type of like force or something? I don't know. And like, I'm like, I feel like there could potentially be something just as
Yeah,
much as
there's
there could potentially be nothing.
yeah.
Um, but I think if there is something, if that's a thing, there's not like a god or a higher power, and it's not about staring at every action that we're doing. I feel like it would just be that for everybody if that's how it worked.
That's what my wife
But
recently said. Whatever, if
yeah,
there's a something after, it's going to be for everybody.
yeah, and it doesn't. Yeah. So I just kind of like, I don't know. That's where I am, where like I have to kind of like allow myself be comfortable with the idea of there being nothing, but I don't like. I still like feel like, what if there is something scientifically that could be explained where there is something? But I
Yeah.
don't believe in like a God or our actions having anything to do with there being something or not.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
in a way, I think atheist is agnostic atheist because atheism just means no belief in God. So, like, I
Yeah.
am a unicornist, but nobody ever
Mhm.
calls me that in public because it hasn't been demonized, right? But
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think priests in the Catholic Church 400
Or there's
years
not
ago,
people actually believing. Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
but they wanted to come up with a derogatory term for people that were starting to not believe because of maybe the Renaissance or science or something like that. And so they
Mhm.
created this thing that's anti, but it's not. Atheism theoretically doesn't have a belief that there's no God. It's just no belief in a God, right? So it's
I think
still,
my husband said that to me because
yeah. So
I
it's
was kind of explaining it, and he's
agnostic
like, I
atheism is
just,
almost like not necessary, but that's what you have to say now because of the
yeah,
stigma.
people think it. That's kind of what my husband was saying, and
Mhm.
he's like, well,
Well,
me
he's a
saying that I'm
smart guy.
atheist doesn't mean I'm saying there is no God and there's definitely nothing, and I'm right. He's like, there's no evidence that proves to me that there is one, and so I currently don't believe in one, but I'm perfectly open to there being evidence that there is one day. And he's like, I'm atheist. I was like, huh. I'm just like
I've been saying
learning
kind
all
of
the
now
terms.
that in a way it's part of our human condition to want to believe in something higher.
Yeah.
So it's part insanity to believe in somebody else's belief.
Yeah, that was
Mhm.
actually
Why
kinda,
would you in a way?
yeah, that's actually something that I went through for a little bit, where I realized that always believing in a higher power, getting me to my goals and my dreams and helping me throughout my life, once that's removed, I was like, I just realized that I have no confidence in myself whatsoever, because it was never me that got me to these places, it was God. So if I don't have God, I started questioning, like, I've always had really big goals and really big dreams, and I'm like, I can't do those on my own. And my husband's like, if there's not a God, then there never was
Yeah.
one, and you got yourself here the first place.
You
It
were
was
always
always
worthy.
you. And I was like, okay, okay. Like trying
Yeah.
to
It's
like
like I
process
tell people
all of it.
the Dumbo story in Disney.
That's what I was
Dumbo
thinking.
didn't
The
need the
feather.
feather. He
Yeah.
always had the power to fly. The feather
Yeah,
helped. The feather
yeah.
was
And so
necessary in the beginning.
yeah, yeah. There's Mickey Mouse episodes that my kids watch that have stuff like that, where they think they have like this good luck thing that's helping them, and then they realized they didn't have it, but they thought they had it, so they were still winning, and it was like all this stuff. But yeah, I've kind of started explaining it. So I'll just say, like, when I have encouraging or uplifting thoughts, I'll kind of explain it as like, I feel like everybody has what I will refer to as like a higher version of themselves. So like there's a version of me that I want to be, and I want to live up to this certain version of me. So when I have these like uplifting thoughts or thoughts to like, maybe I should go for this or whatever, I'll think like scientifically, like within our own brain, like that's the version of me coming out, like trying to encourage me to like pick the right thing. And
I
in a
like
way
that.
it's almost like that helps explain it, because it kind of makes me feel like I still have like something helping me, but it is just myself. But it's like, it's almost like the subconscious and conscious parts of the brain, there's like parts of you that you're not really thinking about that you're doing, that might not be like helping you to live up to the expectation that you want to live up to.
I
And
totally
then,
relate.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that's
because
kind
the
of like how I've
subconscious,
been
it's
explaining.
hidden from us, but that is part of us, and I've felt that too, and I think it's also the more authentic version of us, and so, yeah, I feel like I'm understanding. I might be kind of twisting it in my own way or, like, my own projection, but it's yeah,
No,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm getting it. I feel it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that helps me feel like there's something still helping me, even though it's myself. And I think it's just helped me to continue to have confidence in truly myself instead of an outside thing. But that took a while to be able to confidently do. So,
Do you feel like you
yeah.
are, now that you've kind of gotten there, that it's actually, and easier than before when you thought it was coming from God, or, like, has your capacity
Yeah.
grown in that way? That
Yeah.
was a
My
really
husband and
leading
I,
question. Sorry, but
no,
that's how
that's,
I felt. Yeah, that I
no,
the
yeah.
leaving the church kind of took off I think, really a mental and emotional burden that has allowed
Yeah.
me to do and be things that I always wanted to be, but I just felt like I couldn't, and I feel like a lot of it was the church gumming things up. I think particularly in the prayers and the scripture reading and, the kind of busy work that keeps you and that you feel guilty if you don't do, it kinda kept me from really focusing on things that mattered because I feel like these are the things that really matter and I should be doing them first. And if I'm starting my day not doing these things, I've kind of like ruined it somehow. And so, anyway, that was a really leading
Exactly.
question, but
No, that is exactly how I feel. It like I didn't feel that in the very beginning because in the very beginning it's like I'm dealing with a death basically is how
yeah,
I described the feeling. So it was really, really emotionally hard. And then having to lose like a belief in God, it was like a whole nother death. Like, and that was really difficult. But now my husband and I like I don't have the whole, oh, you're not wearing your garments, you're not doing this or that. Like I it's interesting how everything in my mind has shifted and it's like, no, like he was always an amazing person regardless of whether he was doing those things or not. And it was my judgment or like concern about it that would cause like these little hiccups of like, can you just let me live my life like without
yeah.
doing, And now that we were just talking about this in the car the other day, and I was like, I'm realizing how much less stress, anxiety, depression, all of those things that I've dealt with like on a roller coaster throughout my life are, I'm not going to say they don't exist, but a lot of times it feels like they don't. And if I am in moments where I'm kind of feeling that way, it's so much less severe and more like work related or am I don't know. It's just separate. Where before I the prayers and the scripture study and the church attendance and um might be random subject to throw in, but like uh the use of like THC and stuff like sometimes because both of our parents had cancer and were going through chemo
Mm,
and so they use like THC in different ways to help them. And in both
yeah,
scenarios, our parents like allowed us to try things when we were they're dead
yeah.
now, so
But
that's like
there's
dark,
the guilt.
but
Yeah,
they you can't get
yeah.
them in trouble. But yeah, and like anything that like um or an interest to like try alcohol or even coffee even after I knew like I wasn't in it anymore, my husband removed his records, I was like
Mm,
totally perfectly fine with like being out. um I drinking coffee, I still would feel so sick to my stomach. And I'd immediately have a thought like that's a spirit telling you that it's not okay. I'm like, no, it's
yeah,
the words of the people and the bishops and all the ones who told me that it was not okay. That's what the voices are. Like, and so not having that anymore and realizing that I can just live my life the way that I want to be like fully authentically myself for me and my family and not because of anybody else or any higher power or what I'm expected to do. And I didn't even realize that that's what I was doing when I was in it. I thought I was happy. I thought I was doing great and that this is what I wanted my life to be.
Mhm.
And then getting out of it, I'm like realizing how much stress I had and how I never felt like I was living up to like the standard of, what a not only a Mormon wife or mother, but just like as an individual, I just constantly felt like I wasn't
Same.
doing everything the way that I should, even though I was trying so hard.
Yeah.
The
And
Molly Mormon
yeah,
persona is almost impossible to keep up
yeah,
with all the stresses of life.
And for men too. Yeah.
Peter Priesthood.
Peyton, I think this is maybe one of our longest interviews, and I have so many other questions and things
It
that
is
I wanna
totally
I wanna
awesome.
talk with you about. Yeah, and
that's
so
totally okay.
we probably should wrap up, but, I do wanna, like, after we end the show, I wanna talk to you, and if you're yeah,
Hey,
there's
let's
more,
do it.
but where do we
Okay,
like, I guess for, like, wrapping up,
let's try to
any
wrap up then.
yeah,
Here's
what's
what I'll
the
say.
okay, go ahead,
Payton,
Gene.
we are so honored to have you on our show. And we want all of our viewers to go check out your channel and like and subscribe. And
Yes.
we think that the future for you is bright, and you have star quality, and you could be the it girl coming up pretty soon. You never know.
Oh,
Together we
you're
can
so
work on
nice.
that.
Yeah.
And so
Thank
Well,
you.
I feel like you're ending, Gene, and I just wanna make sure Peyton has if there's any last thoughts or
sure.
final, like, wrapping up, like, to this part of her story that we didn't get to or missed.
I feel like I said a lot of like what went down. I have like there's a
Okay,
lot more
okay.
details on my YouTube channel if people
Yeah.
want to go see
Right.
like in more in-depth stuff of how it went down. And then I'll just reiterate how amazing my husband is. I'm so
And we're going to
thankful that
provide
he helped me
links
through all this.
links to
Yes.
the shows that you've mentioned, and we're going to I believe that you're a good writer, and I'm going to ask you to help us write the synopsis of this story so that we can have a
I'll do
clear,
it.
concise, meaningful, part of the description. And I have full confidence in you, and I'm lazy. No, I'm just kidding. I think that you are pretty awesome. And so it's been a pleasure and a delight, even though it's 2:04 a.m. for me right now in Bangkok.
Oh,
I'm totally
Oh
wired
my.
and awake, listening to all the things you're saying. And even though there are some other things happening right now that we got to attend to, we're so happy to have you. Everybody, like and subscribe and share this fantastic story, with your friends, your neighbors, your enemies, everybody. And
thank
so
you.
thanks for watching. Bye-bye.